Well, good morning. I'm David Ruffin, Chair of the North Carolina Historical Commission. Welcome to our December 6th, 2003 meeting, which is virtual for this quarter. Welcome to the commissioners, welcome to the staff, certainly welcome to the general public that's listening via Zoom today. As is the norm for our meetings, I would like to begin by welcoming again everyone, but also particularly for commissioners, ask the question of any conflicts of interest. The agenda has been published and various documents associated with the agenda have been shared with the commissioners. And in such that I do need to ask for any statements of conflicts of interest that might come up, particularly, I guess, frankly, it would be largely in the sessions or data sessions area today. But if there are any conflicts of interest, please state that at this point. I do also need to call the roll for the record. There is an added dimension, as you well know, for virtual meetings, and that is because it is virtual and not in person. Unfortunately, we have to call the roll for every motion or item that we make decisions on. So first of all, I obviously need to call the roll. Newell Clark.
Here.
Shana Condil.
Shana, here.
Shana Condil. Dr. Denard.
Here.
Sam Dixon. Barbara Groom. You're muted, Barbara. Barbara, you're muted, I believe. Yes.
Here.
Okay. Dr. Johnson.
Here.
Dr. Lee.
Here.
Susan Phillips.
Here.
Noah Reynolds.
Present.
David Ruffin here. Barbara Snowden hopefully will be here. And again, for those of you, and we began the meeting in September, unfortunately having to share the sad news that Mary Lynn Bryan, Dr. Bryan, had incurred a serious injury in August down in Riceville Beach, but just wonderful to see you on the call, Dr. Bryan. So we all delight in your faster recovery, frankly, than we had that had been indicated. So delightful to see you. And of course, for the general public, Dr. Bryan is a emeritus member of the commission. Okay, the next order of business, since we certainly do have a quorum, is to approve the minutes for the September 19th meeting of the commission, which was in person. And I will open it up for any discussions, questions, clarifications, or motions to approve or modify the minutes of the September 19th. Do I hear any?
Mr. Chair, I move approval. David Denard.
Dr. Denard has moved approval. Do I hear a second?
A second.
Commissioner Groom has seconded. All those in favor indicate an aye as I call the roll. Mr. Clark.
Aye.
Ms. Condil.
Aye.
Dr. Denard.
Aye.
Mr. Dixon. Ms. Groom.
Aye.
Dr. Johnson.
Aye.
Dr. Lee.
Aye.
Ms. Phillips.
I abstain because I wasn't there.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
And Ms. Snowden, whether or not she's been able to join yet or not, I know it's her intention to do so. And David Ruffin, aye. So it passes unanimous with one abstention. Okay, as the next order of business, and I will turn this over to Dr. Waters, Deputy Secretary, to walk us through the accessions and deaccessions from the museums and historic sites, North Carolina.
Thank you,
Dr.
Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first I'll thank Parker on the approval of the minutes. And Parker, as you know, was not with us at that last meeting, so he had to listen to all of that through the recording and by video. And we had a very robust discussion in that last meeting, as you know, and he was able to distill this down in a way that I think got us that approval. So I want to thank Parker for that work, the work that he did.
And very accurately, I might, because I read them 3 times, and I thought, wow, that's it. Because I knew that Parker was not there, and I thought, wow, that's a great job. So, but I'm sure very tedious.
So thank you to Parker for that. You have before you the recommendations for accessions and deaccessions. We'll take the accessions first, and Mr. Chair, with your approval, we can take the museum division together if you want to do that, or if you want to separate it out, I'll follow your lead on that.
Together would be fine, yes.
Okay, so you have before you the proposed accessions for the North Carolina History Museum, the North Carolina Museum of the Albemarle, and the North Carolina Gateway Museum, and the North Carolina Maritime Museums. You have those before you. The committee met internally, approved these unanimously. And as you all know, they do a really good job on the things that they're accessioning into the museum. But if there's any discussion, Mr. Chair, I'll invite any discussion that you all have on that before you ask for a motion for approval.
Yeah, I was just the comment, and I know Barbara Snowden, if she hasn't joined quite yet, would concur with this. I did notice the card. We used to call them bubblegum cards for Catfish Hunter up in Hertford, North Carolina. And obviously he was a historic player in baseball. But beyond that, and it wasn't in the commentary, I noticed, he really changed. He started the whole process of free agency. Some people would argue that wasn't necessarily a positive thing in baseball. But anyway, that it further, I think is designated in baseball parlance as a historic figure, because his agreement, I think, with the New York Yankees at that time. But it was neat to see the baseball card for Catfish Hunter in Hertford, North Carolina.
Any other discussion on that? If not, Mr. Chair, we ask for approval from the commission for these proposed accessions into the museum division.
Okay, for the 4 museums that Dr. Waters alluded to, and hopefully you've seen in the extensive write-ups for the proposed accessions, do I hear a motion?
I move that we approve the recommendation to assess the materials for the 4 museums.
I'll second it.
Dr. Johnson moves, Dr. Denard seconds. All in favor, say aye, and I will call the roll. Mr. Clark.
Aye.
Ms. Condell.
Aye.
Dr. Denard.
Aye.
Mr. Dixon. Ms. Groom.
Aye.
Dr. Johnson.
Aye.
Dr. Lee.
Aye.
Susan Phillips. Ms. Phillips.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Ms. Snowden. And David Ruffin, aye. The accessions to the North Carolina Museum of History, the North Carolina Museum of the Albemarle, the North Carolina Mountain Gateway Museum, and the North Carolina Maritime Museums are approved. So
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Dr. Waters, then I guess the NC State Historic Sites.
Yes, and so now you have before you the proposed accessions to the Division of State Historic Sites. And so Michelle is on the call, and Michelle pays close attention to these as well. And I don't know if she has any comments that she'd like to make on the proposed accessions to State Historic Site. But Michelle, I'll open it up to you.
Thank you, Dr. Waters. Thank you, Chair Ruffin. I actually have no comment to add, and I'm happy for it to stand as is.
And Mr. Chair, just as with the museums, the committee met internally, these were approved unanimously. And so now we place them before you all for consideration for approval.
Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Make a motion to approve.
I believe Mr. Clark first said move. Do I hear a second? Was that Commissioner Groom as a second? Okay. All in favor, Mr. Clark,
Aye.
Ms. Condo,
Aye.
Dr. Denard,
Aye.
Ms. Groom,
Yes, aye.
Dr. Johnson,
Aye.
Dr. Lee,
Aye.
Ms. Phillips,
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds,
Aye.
Ms. Snowden, and David Ruffin, aye. The accessions to the North Carolina State Historic Sites are approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now, you have before you proposed deaccessions only to the North Carolina History Museum and the North Carolina Maritime Museums. Again, the committee met internally on these, approved these unanimously to bring before you all for approval. But any discussion that you might have or questions you might have, we will entertain those. Yes, Commissioner Condit.
I had a question on the second one, the newspapers, the World War I newspapers. There's a photograph below that shows sort of envelopes and some other documents. Is that related to the deaccession?
Let me find that one.
It's on page 46.
It is. They're all, it is related to that.
And so those are also what, and I guess I'm wondering what those documents are. It says 2 newspapers, which I see in the first 2 photographs. And so I'm wondering what the other documents are.
One is an envelope, as you can see. The other were, I can't remember exactly, Commissioner Condil, because we didn't go into any detailed discussion on these. They were items that they didn't think were relevant to the collection. But if you want me to get a more specific answer, I'm happy to reach out to do that.
But it wasn't the condition. The first thought I had was just the condition or degradation of the, I don't know.
It wasn't the condition. It was something that they felt wasn't relevant to the collection.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it just makes me slightly nervous. I don't like throwing wrenches in anything, but the description seems to really and I see the photographs of the newspapers and they do look like there's no way, you're able to open those up without them, they look very brittle. But I feel like for due diligence, it makes sense to understand what that other photograph contains.
Well,
I also, along those lines, and what I think makes me a little less nervous is that they're going to be transferred rather than just
destroyed
thrown away, and that they'll be a part of something that people can research, which oftentimes when we get these recommendations to deaccession, things will go either into the teaching component or it'll go to some other unit instead of just disappearing altogether. With that said, it would be a little helpful to know kind of a little bit more about, since we can't read it, what these documents are, so we know what is going into the history file.
I'm happy to get that additional information for you all. Sarah, you haven't seen these, have you?
Not, and so I haven't checked on them, and I think they would have noted if they offered them to our military collection, the documents.
If, Mr. Chairman, if you make it larger, you can tell it's an honorable discharge from the Army, a furlough from the Army to the person who's was referenced before, Mr. James Rawls. Envelopes that those came in, and an enlistment record for that person.
And Parker, I saw your hand as well.
If I may, I just, I shot a quick email to John Campbell just now with the link, and I asked him to jump on real quick if he's able to. I don't know that he's at his desk, but if he does get that, he can address that right now. We can, you can sort it out here during the meeting if you want to come back to it.
Mr.
Yeah.
Chair,
That would certainly work, and because we don't have a very detailed agenda today, we certainly could do that, Parker. And I do appreciate Ms. Condell's inquiry about that. The question I always ask for the DIA sessions, are there any constraints on just approving these in total, or there's no auctioning or anything of that nature that would be requiring of a separate vote on the DIA sessions? Is that correct?
yes, that is correct, Mr. Chair.
So, Mr. Chair, just a point of clarity, are we raising the question about the title that the miscellaneous World War I papers, is that too general?
Well, I think for Commissioner Condell will certainly speak for yourself. I think it's a certainly legitimate question about what is it that we're deassessing.
Yeah, I think
I'm willing to certainly wait on if we can get further information about that during the course of the committee. There's no issue for me on that.
And
yeah, I think for me, what I'm looking for is a little bit of clarity on the why. You know, what does it consist of, and why are we deaccessioning it when it was accessioned apparently at one point? So deaccessioning, I think, is a, you know, I don't want to like overstate it, but it's a pretty serious move to make. And so I really appreciate on the other objects having the understanding of why the staff made the determination. And I understand that they can't exhibit it. It looks like they're too fragile to exhibit. But I would like a little more clarity as to why it needs to be deaccessioned specifically.
And here comes John. John, thanks for joining. A question we're going through the DIA sessions now, and so the one item that has come up that Commissioner Condell has raised a question about is item 2017.59.8, the miscellaneous World War I papers of James A. Rawls.
Yes.
And could you just provide a little clarity on why staff was proposing to deaccession this particular item?
Yes, it's just a very little bit of information in them. And what the curator wanted to do was to put the files in our item history folder so that they'll still be accessible to the staff. He just didn't believe they would ever have any exhibit value, and probably very little archives value too, but we would still have access to it in case we needed to see them or whatever. And it could go on exhibit because the museum's going to keep it if ever needed. It was just that he didn't feel like it needed the kind of care that it would go into as being an accession item.
Thank you, John.
Sure. Yeah. Anything else I can?
Commissioner Condell, I'll give you an opportunity to respond and give your thoughts to that.
Yeah, I imagine this was a donation, it looks like was made in 2017. And so I guess, and I don't know that you would have this available to you now, but I imagine that it was a collection that the entire thing was accessioned and has just now been gone through. Am I projecting?
Yeah, hold on one second now. Just 1 second. Let me see if I can find that collection.
Commissioner Phillips.
That's correct, though. Yes.
Mr. Chair, I see Commissioner Phillips' hand is up with a question.
Yes, Commissioner Phillips.
I would also wonder if we had any other items like this in our collection, because I mean, I think it's kind of interesting to see enlistment papers and furlough papers and, you know, a discharge. That's, I'm not an archivist, so I have no idea of what the quality of those papers is, but if there's something else like that in the collection, I would understand more about why we wouldn't need papers and furlough papers and, you know, a discharge. That's, I'm not an archivist, so I have no idea of what the quality of those papers is, but if there's something else like that in the collection, I would understand more about why we wouldn't need papers and furlough papers and, you know, a discharge. That's, I'm not an archivist, so I have no idea what the quality of those papers is, but if there's something else like that in the collection, I would understand more about why we wouldn't need papers and furlough papers and, you know, a discharge. That's, I'm not an archivist, so I have no idea what those papers is, but if there's something else like that in the collection, I would understand more about why we wouldn't need papers and furlough papers and, you know, a discharge. That's, I'm not an archivist, so I have no idea what those papers is, but if there's something else like that collection, I would understand more about why we would need furlough papers and, you know, a discharge. That's, certainly not worth all that repetition.
Yeah, I thought we had a
Commissioner Snowden, there we go. I think now that she's muted, I think that fixed it.
okay. Welcome, Commissioner Snowden. So the question I think on the table might be either deferral until next meeting or Commissioner Condell, if you feel comfortable with what's been said, but I think certainly a legitimate inquiry. The question I think on the table might be either deferral until next. Commissioner Condell, if you feel.
Okay. I think Commissioner Condell, if you want to speak now, I think you can.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think I just for me personally, I would like some more information about the donation as a whole, you know, and why this particular part of it is being deaccessioned. It's recent, it's 2017. So, you know, to me, that feels like it was accessioned not that long ago. So I would love some more information and context.
Yeah. The museum can certainly do that and have that ready for the next historical commission.
Yeah.
So am I understanding you want to make this pending perhaps until more information?
Yes, we'll just defer it until the next quarter meeting. Mr. Campbell, thank you very much for your quick response. And, you know, one of the things that I think is healthy about this discussion, to be quite frank, is that sometimes this appears to be just a pro forma exercise. to accept or reject or whatever. But I do want, hopefully the staff understands we have deep respect for the work that they do to make these conscious decisions to assess or deassess. But it also, I hope the staff accepts that commissioners also enjoy reading and looking at the detail, and it inevitably, because of our role, it's going to prompt some questions from time to time. And Commissioner Condell, I think you quite appropriately exercised your right for that. So,
And Mr.
Thank you
Chair.
for saying that, David, and thank you, John, for taking the time. I appreciate that. Yeah, I want to echo that. The staff I know works very hard and intentionally, but definitely want to make sure that we're doing our job on this side too.
And I think I can speak for staff. I know that Sarah knows that as a trained researcher myself, that I will sit down and ask questions about certain things, and staff does that as well. And so I think that they deeply appreciate the fact that you're taking this type of care and attention to what they're sending in and asking for approval or not of. So we do appreciate that.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Reynolds, yes.
Yeah, I just want to follow up at the next quarterly meeting. Perhaps we could have a brief discussion on, accession and deaccession, because I can recall when I first got on the commission, I didn't understand that disposal could also mean just moving to another museum, different collection, out of state. And there's been several military uniforms and papers and such in the past, and it turned out that they were donated as a larger collection, but the person in question wasn't North Carolina, so it was transferred to another state or something like that. So there's a larger story there, and I think it's worth digging into that a little bit as we look at this particular example.
I think that's a very appropriate comment, because I think as we turned over commissioners, we don't have the understanding. I tended to think that much of this was done by duplication reasons. In other words, there was so much duplication of like items that they weren't meaningful necessarily. So I agree. I think maybe if we could ask the staff just briefly to share with the commission the ground rules or the guidelines that the staff tends to go through around the accessions and deaccessions would be helpful, because we've got a lot of new commissioners.
Happy to do that.
2 years. Yes.
We'll be happy to do that, Mr. Chairman. And so Sarah, I'm gonna ask for your help here on these proposed deaccessions, because this is just for the North Carolina History Museum, and it's just one item. Is it possible to pull that out, or do we need to defer the entire list of items from the museum? John, you may have an answer here, but Sarah, I'm looking to you here as well, if you have any guidance that you can provide on that.
I think it would probably be appropriate if there was a motion to pull that one out from consideration, vote on that, and then vote on the rest.
Right.
So you've like a Robert's Rule of Order thing, you've pulled out that one for reconsideration or denied it, and then approve the rest.
Okay, thank you, Sarah.
Dr. Waters, if I might, could you also just pull out the one above it too, the newspapers from that same collection? That way we can just take care of that. Basically, they're from the same collection, so it might be better to not vote on either of those two today, if that's okay.
Okay, Mr. Chair, with your permission, we'll pull those 2 items from consideration.
Absolutely.
Okay, and I'll let you all do the motion for that.
So if I could go back to Commissioner Condell about this, would you mind crafting or stating your motion relative to these 2 items? And I agree with Sarah Kuntz on that. Let's vote on that motion to defer those 2 items, and then we can move on for the remainder, so that doesn't have to come back to the commission.
Sure. So I move that we remove, let's see, that would be item number 2 which is accession number 217.59.6-7 and item 2017.59.8 from the list of deaccessions for us to consider.
I'll second that motion.
Commissioner Condell has made the motion of the two items on proposed for deaccessions. Commissioner Johnson has seconded. I will call the roll. All in favor of Commissioner Condell's motion, say aye, please. Mr. Clark.
Aye.
Ms. Condell.
Aye.
Dr. Denard.
Aye.
Ms. Groom.
Aye.
Dr. Johnson.
Aye.
Dr. Lee.
Aye.
Ms. Phillips.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Ms. Snowden.
Aye.
And David Ruffin, aye. Okay, so do I hear any other discussion prior to us entertaining a motion on accepting the remaining proposed deaccessions? Okay, hearing no questions, do I hear a motion on accepting the proposed deaccessions to the North Carolina Museum of History and the North Carolina Maritime Museums, absent the two items that were just agreed to be deferred until the next quarter?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Mr.
I'll
Clark
second
has moved and Dr. Denard has seconded. All in favor, Mr. Clark.
Aye.
Ms. Condell.
Aye.
Dr. Denard.
Aye.
Ms. Groom.
Aye.
Dr. Johnson. Dr. Johnson may be moved.
Aye.
Okay. Dr. Lee.
Aye.
Ms. Phillips.
Aye.
I presume that was a yes. Okay. Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Ms. Snowden.
Yes.
David Ruffin, yes. And that so moved, and I thank you all for that. Again, very healthy, I think, discussion around the sessions. And again, if you don't mind, next quarter, just give us a thumbnail on a little bit of the ground rules around how these decisions are made. It would be, I think, instructive to the full commission.
We certainly will, Mr. Chair. And thank you. Thank you to all of the commissioners.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is frankly one that I have struggled with, honestly. We've had, discussions all the way back now over a year, almost a year and a half, of this issue of concern that I think the entire commission has perhaps a little different perspectives on, but still a consensus on feeling a sense that history has been degraded to some degree in terms of public awareness and certainly through the educational systems, and some of the issues associated with that we've shared. And as Dr. Bryan said, very, very robust discussions that we had in September. Specifically, I sent an email a couple of weeks ago in an attempt I had made to try to itemize or bulletize, if you will, what some of the highlights of our discussion were, to take a resolution that was passed in December of 2022 to basically acknowledge the issue that I think we felt, and it obviously begged the question of what do we do about that, frankly, other than just pass feel-good resolutions. And I began to realize that we would look like we were going into circular discussions about that. We had a lot of ideas. The staff provided excellent feedback as it was related to the resolution in December. They gave us very robust reports on certain suggested steps to take. We had great ideas in the September meeting. Many of those ended up in what I think these maybe 6 or 7, I'd like to repeat those, and that was more advocacy and exposure placed on what is already being done by existing programs. In other words, don't start over on things that are already being initiated. Certainly riding the almost certain wave of increased historical awareness coming with America 250, more coordination with the National Humanities Society, more high-profile participation and advocacy by commissioners ourselves in promoting all things history, and not only in our various locales in North Carolina, but within our, frankly, in our areas of expertise and profession. Exploring more initiatives through Project Push, more work with the North Carolina Historical and Literary Association, and continued vigilance on adequacy of history resource funding by state government itself. So again, these were all very, very good items of discussion and ideas for further energy to be put behind them, but it kept coming back to me that we were in a little bit of a circular discussion. The idea then came to me that, well, perhaps this is an appropriate time for a committee to be established to keep some energy on this, to put more focus on it and not just throw it out for quarterly discussions. And I had some very, very healthy discussions with Commissioner Reynolds relative to that. And Commissioner, I'll ask you, if you will, to share a little bit of what we've talked about.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Ruffin. Yeah, in Chairman Ruffin's email of November 20th, he had indicated he was going to call all of us to discuss a resolution. And I think in the context of my conversation with Chairman Ruffin, I think I shared his concern that putting more words on a page to rest in the form of a resolution might not actually move the work forward. We might need to do something else to breathe life into the words in the form of more action and more time and energy by the commissioners themselves and working with staff to that effect. I had a question that he had said at the end of the meeting, which is perhaps we could have a committee work on this further. I'm in support of a committee doing that. I have some draft words regarding, what a resolution might look like to form a committee, but I think it would be a healthy discussion for us as commissioners to discuss whether we want to have a committee to pursue the work and what a final resolution like that might look like. So to that effect, I'll open up the floor, turn it back over to Chairman Ruffin to lead us.
Yes, I would encourage further commentary about that. Again, so much energy was expended, I think, in our last meeting about great ideas, and it was done in, I think, and much of this in concurrence and rather symbiotic support of what staff is already doing. But we're just trying to find a conduit, if you will, for continuing that energy, and not just, as Commissioner Reynolds aptly said, just put words down and feel good about it and move on. So, and my sense is a commit would certainly give us a gauge for what's going on with some of these initiatives. What are we doing as commissioners from quarter to quarter that could advance some of these thoughts and just keep this whole issue on the front burner. It just seems to me that was the mechanism that would more appropriately keep life in this issue that I think all of us feel rather passionately about.
In hearing this conversation, I think that it does help us put more action into what we need to do. And working with the smaller committee, they can hash through some of maybe the logistics, prioritize some of what work needs to be done, if it's to, kind of suss out, here's how we can help staff, how best we can help staff. Here's where we don't really know how much we can weigh in on X, but to have a committee, I think being able to do that makes it more nimble. And I think that the committee can exist until it is disbanded. I don't think there should be a time limit on it. And that's just my opinion, as long as this issue is before us, because it seems to me that this is very much a working committee.
Thank you.
One of the things I'm concerned about is I want to, I think a committee is a good idea. I also think we need to have specific ideas of things that we can do to move this idea forward. I like the idea of a resolution, but I want to know, okay, what can I do as a commissioner to make sure that this is in the public, that it is accepted as a powerful resolution? And because not that many people know exactly what the commission does, but yet they see our names on books and they see the meetings if they watch them on YouTube, which, by the way, I did watch the first part of the meeting, and I'm not a very good technical person, so I apologize for that. But I want to know, what can I as a commissioner do to move forward something that I'm very passionate about?
And Commissioner Snowden, if I may say so, I think a key part of what Commissioner Reynolds and I have talked about is that committee would be a bit of a check. I hate to use that term, it kind of seems negative, but on what activities us commissioners have participated in. It would be a way to keep a bit of a scorecard on that and keep that also as a part of that committee's role.
I also agree there does need to be a check. You need to tell me you shouldn't do that if you need, I don't need to do it.
Well, we also are quite cognizant of the bounds by which we operate. We're not a quasi-judicial body. We're not a policymaking body. We tend to act in a reactive way to whatever's brought before us. But I think each and every one of us in our own ways have, again, such a passion for this issue that we feel like if we don't advocate for more awareness of history, who does? And that's a line taken literally out of a conversation I had with Commissioner Phillips yesterday. As I think she aptly said, if we're not advocating, who will? So please continue your thoughts on this, other members of the commission, if you have any reaction to kind of where our thoughts are. Not trying to be coy here. Commissioner Reynolds has worked to put some words together around us potentially forming the committee, which we'll gladly share by screen in a moment if you'd like to get to that. But I would certainly encourage and enjoy any comments further by the broader commission.
I wouldn't mind sharing an experience I had last week. The history teacher at Asheville High School asked me to join her for a ribbon cutting ceremony at Vance birthplace, that they have cleaned up a cemetery that's across the street from Zeb Vance's birthplace, and wanted to had some signs out and wanted to have a ribbon cutting ceremony. And she asked me to come with her. And I thought, I'd love to do that. I'd love to do that. So I met her, maybe it was Thursday afternoon at 4 o'clock, and had a nice conversation with a lot of people. I met some of the folks who run the Vance birthplace, and walked up to the cemetery and saw that some of Governor Vance's ancestors were buried up there. And then I found out that there was also an African-American cemetery up there, but it wasn't as distinguished. They just knew about where it was. And I said, well, we need to get some cadaver dogs and people up here finding ways to figure out where this is and honor this ceremony as well. And they said they're working on that. And I wouldn't have even known about that if it had not been for this teacher, Liza Wager, at the high school. And I felt like, why didn't I know about this? How could I have known about this? I meant to ask her how she found out about it. Mm-hmm. So how would I have known that that was happening? I don't know. I don't know if there's a site that I'm not checking or what, but I loved going. I loved representing our committee, and would I just didn't know about it, and I want to make that better. I want to know how to find these things out that are happening. So that was my experience, but I was glad I went, and I found out a lot, and I'd like to go back and learn more.
Right.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chairman, if I may, Commissioner Groom, thanks for bringing that up. And Michelle is on the call, and we knew that ribbon cutting was happening there. Michelle, do you want to speak to that any? Because to Commissioner Groom's remarks.
In terms of the ribbon cutting?
And I don't know, and them and ideas, and we can, working, I know that the committee is going to need some staff report, staff support. Commissioner, Chairman Ruffin and I discussed that, and we're happy to talk with you too about that, Commissioner Reynolds. And Michelle, Michelle always has, the whole team always has great ideas, and it may be that we need to find a better way of letting the commission itself know about some of the things that are happening, and that would come from my office as well. But Michelle, I don't know if there are any thoughts that you have that you might want to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think what would help is if there was a specific question, I'm happy to speak to that, but I do, in terms of information sharing, I mean, it might be good for me to give you all some good news that we have finally gotten funding for a PIO for the Division of State Historic Sites. So the division has been without a public information officer, I want to say since maybe somewhere around 2010. And, we have some like the Museum of History has several information staff who help not only with interfacing with the press, but also with social media. And so in our situation, we were really not at a place of capacity where we wanted to be in terms of sharing out the story of the good work of the division. And so I do want to just highlight that I am hopeful now that the budget has been certified, that we will be able to get someone in that position in the next few months. And I believe that also will impact how quickly you all will be able to see more information about our programming in advance.
Michelle, thank you. I'm glad I called on you. That was, probably one of the points that needed to be made. I think this came up, this idea of staff capacity for the Office of Archives and History writ broadly, I think is something, Mr. Chair, that we discussed in that last meeting. And so I think that this work that you all are taking on can be a tremendous help in that respect. And Commissioner Condell, I saw you shaking your head, not knowing now that they were without a PIO for some time. And so these are things that I think that your advocacy on will help greatly. So thank you, Michelle, for jumping in there.
And I ran into Michelle at the dedication of one of the state historic markers, and I found out about it through a newspaper article. And so maybe this is not on our committee, son, but maybe we need to think about possibly an outcome of a general calendar that's saying what's going on, so that if nothing else, we can show up and make our presence known.
And I was gonna share on those same lines that the African American Heritage Commission sends out to its commissioners a listing of activities that are going on, and then the commissioners will say what it is that they're doing, and a lot of it has to do with all the things that y'all have been speaking about, including when folks have given talks that especially pertain to history. So I think like that general calendar or something that goes out to the commissioners, us, helps them also, and it would help us promote what's going on across the division without being maybe really burdensome. I know that, yeah, it is difficult. We haven't had a public information officer in the position. That'll hamper, but I know our commission has a way to send things out.
Yeah, and just to clarify, the lack of a public information officer is just specific to historic sites. So like the highway marker program is a different reality. But we do send all of our events. We do to the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources marketing and PR team. So every few months they ask us for all of our events, and we do get them to the department marketing and publicity team. So I am not sure how accessible that is to everyone once it gets up to that highest level of the department. But we are lifting it into the hands of marketing. How does that then convey out to the people who need it, particularly commissioners who are supposed to be aware of these things? I think that's the question that needs to be answered. But yes, I find out about things after the fact too. So for instance, the highway marker program, I found out about that because I do a lot of work with Susan Ingalls, who's the daughter of Francis Ingalls out in Edenton. And so I went really just as a citizen interested in that history.
That was the reason I was there too, because I was just interested. But let's get back onto our topic. Do we need a motion before we hear what Mr. Reynolds has going to present to us about the formation of a committee, or do we go to that now and then come to the formation of a committee later?
Well, I think my sense is, Commissioner Snowden, we certainly want authorization to form the committee, and then we'll talk about the potential members and then whatever else. Again, Commissioner Reynolds would like to direct our conversation. Appropriate remark. And again, are there any other comments that you'd like to share, and then we can move on to take it back to Commissioner. Yes, Commissioner Phillips.
I was just going to say that, excuse me, my voice. I think that the question of a calendar is something that this would be the perfect kind of thing for the committee to consider and to find out, where does the information go that Ramona sends? Who's got it? How just practically do we get the information to the people who need it? And I think the general public would like to know on Saturday, December 7th, what's going on in North Carolina, and not have to separate historical markers from historic sites. So I think that's exactly the kind of work the practical work that I would like the committee to do.
Mr. Chair, I have a comment.
Yes, Commissioner Condell.
I would like to just comment, and Dr. Waters sort of saw my face when there was no POI since 2010. I can't imagine I think comms sometimes gets a bit of a reputation as like sort of a spin agent, but the work that they do is so vital, and I think ties directly into what the committee can do to help achieve the goals, right? Like everything that you identified means that we're not communicating well. So how do we do that? How do we reach people, let them know? I think one of the things that popped into my head is that I would love to have talking points. I am giving remarks all the time over the state of North Carolina. And if I had talking points that, from the state that, we could, or from this commission, that we wanted to make sure were being said, I'd be happy to make sure that I incorporate those into my remarks. So, and I think, and I'm forgetting who said it, but even just showing up is really powerful. So if we can sort of get that going and organized, I think it can be really powerful, and we can help assist that public information officer as well in their work, because it's vital to share Michelle was saying, the good work that they are doing. It's not that nothing's happening. Lots of things are happening, which is really exciting. And so like, I think that's part of our task as well, is to help spread that word.
I will just say, Commissioner Condell, that I don't even know how many other PIOs there already are in the Office of Archives and History, because I know within historic sites, the North Carolina Transportation Museum has one that they already had before they came into our fold organizationally. So that was a kind of awkwardness that we had a subsidiary museum underneath the mother division that had a PIO, but the division itself did not have one. But there are several, I think, at the Museum of History. There are probably some associated across Archives and History. So I just wanted to make sure you all knew it wasn't that there were no PIOs in the Office of Archives and History. That is not true. What is true is that the Division of State Historic Sites and our 27 entities and the string of pearls that we have not had a PIO for 13 or so years.
Well, Mr. Chair, if I may, and I saw Sarah's face here, and there's not a PIO for the Office of Archives and History, and really there's only one for the Museum of History division, and that person has really concentrated their activities on the flagship museum here in Raleigh. And this is, I just had a sit down just to report to you all a conversation with the communications and marketing person for the department writ large about what priorities I had for the Office of Archives and History in the coming year. And one of them was to stress the need, especially, and Ramona is now on the screen as well, and Ramona knows, and that even for her division, there is a big need, because the work that happens in all of these divisions, but I would emphasize SHPO and the Office of State Archaeology as well here, because it's so forward facing to the public, and there's a major economic impact to the work that happens in that division, I want to thank Commissioner Reynolds for actually taking the time to actually join a group of us. We hosted the National Conference of State Historic Preservation Officers in October. You saw that in your report in Winston-Salem. And I was glad that we reached out directly to Commissioner Reynolds to let him know that that was happening. And he did take the time to come out and join that group. And Ramona, if you want to say anything else there, and Sarah as well in Sarah's division, it would be great if we had a PIO for each one of these divisions, because there's so much important work that happens there. But if we have time, I would invite them to make any comment that they'd like to make regarding that.
Yeah,
I would just add something from an America 250th conversation we had the other day. I think it's kind of a two-way street. I was talking with a group out west called Museums in Partnership. Jeff Futch kind of organizes that group out of the Western office. And he was talking about the importance of inviting your local House or Senate delegate to events. And I think that's something that we don't often think about. And I think that maybe that's an education point for our staff at individual locations, is think about things that you would like a commissioner to possibly attend. That doesn't mean we expect everybody to attend everything, but it's kind of a two-way street to say, hey, we'd love to have you at a marker dedication. We'd love to have you at this ribbon cutting. That just like we would a member of the House or Senate delegation or local government delegation. I think that would be very appropriate for us to take back to our individual places and spaces, and suggest that as well, because it's challenging with a big department to create effective communication strategies that people will pay attention to, because even in staff, when we send them, all the staff blast emails, they often don't read everything, or it gets overwhelming if there's lots of events. So it's a challenging thing to do that effectively. And I think it takes all parties helping with that to make it better. But at least from my perspective, that's not been something in my tenure we've thought about doing, is inviting commission members to events. And I think we should. I think it's a great idea. So I'm happy to think about that further.
Well, Sarah, the only way I think commissioners can live, as they say, walk the walk on this and talk the talk is do more in being more profile. We can't. And I think one of the advantages of the committee to me is it would be a conduit for what Commissioner Johnson said earlier in the conversation about distilling what is reasonable, understanding the turf differences within the larger department anyway, and then on a quarterly basis giving the full commission a more refined direction about what we could do to complement staff and complement the broader department's goals, rather than just get in quarterly open discussions about what feels good.
Chair Ruffin, do you mind if I follow up on Sarah's comment?
Not at all.
Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful as always to see you. And I do want to also thank Mr. Reynolds for joining us not once, but twice during our time in Winston-Salem. And that was very remarked upon by our colleagues to see the support we have from this commission through Mr. Reynolds' participation. And that was only because he is a local Winston-Salem resident, of course. But I wanted to just follow up on Sarah and Michelle's comments. I think that there is an emphasis, in my opinion, on a lot of the venue-oriented events that are going on, venue-oriented events for assets that the department owns, controls, stewards. But there are other events going on, such as the Highway Marker Program. And I know that we have had commissioners join us in the past for that. And I'd love to work with Dr. Waters, Parker, Chair Ruffin on how we can better communicate with you those opportunities as they come up. They oftentimes are very media rich opportunities to for lack of a better term, fly the flag of what we do and how we serve North Carolinians. But I do encourage you all to help us think about how we can help amplify the programs that are not necessarily venue-based, which are more of our more service-oriented programs, which are, I think, not always the easiest fit for marketing when there's an events calendar. And I put in the chat, there is an agency events calendar, but it's really all of the elements of our agency. And in the past, before we joined forces with our natural colleagues, it was much more a humanities-oriented agency, and now we have grown far beyond that. And so how to find our place in the midst of all this wonderful work that others are doing, I think continues to be a little bit of a challenge. There's a lot of good things going on. How do we find our place in that, especially for the service programs where we're not counting heads for visitation? So I appreciate the opportunity to comment.
Ramon, is that calendar available to us to look at?
Yes, ma'am. I put it in the chat, and Matt, I think there's some way that you perhaps could share that link with the public so they know what we're talking about as well. But I just put it in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't mind looking at a calendar and saying, okay, this is going on here, and I might be able to attend it.
But not all things, Ms. Snowden, will end up on the calendar. I think that's one of my what I'm trying to flag as an opportunity is how do we get things on the calendar that are not necessarily a long-term exhibit or something like that. So thank you.
Thank you. Can I bring us back to our committee? I would like to make a motion that we form a temporary committee to flesh out things that can be done by this commission to propel our aims. Does that make sense?
Well, it is, and I think it's a very good point in time, but I would like, if I could, defer to Commissioner Reynolds on that, because he has put some very timely effort in putting some words together. If that maybe along those lines, would you
I yield to,
Consent to the
Noah.
yield on that, Commissioner Snowden.
Yes, I yield to Noah.
Chairman Ruffin, with the permission of the other commissioners, I'm hearing a consensus that there's two questions before us. One is, do we form a committee? And the second, a longer discussion, is what is its exact charge? And to that extent, I've tried to combine those two into a short resolution, which authorizes a committee, and then in very, very broad terms provides some basic preliminary guidance on what is the charter for that committee. And I spent some time thinking about the last meeting that we had, and all of the various viewpoints that were brought up in that, and tried to incorporate that into some bullet points for a charter or a role for the committee, which is obviously up for discussion and revision. But in order to get moving, we have to get something on paper. So Chairman Ruffin and I, as a result of our discussion, he asked me if I would put something down into a motion, which I have done. And I think he's prepared to put that up on the screen. So I would have put a motion on the floor in writing that we form this committee, and then charge it with a few tasks. And I'll turn it over to the chair if you want to proceed with that. Or if we can
Yes,
get a
I'm
second.
gonna, hopefully you all can see the screen at this point. Are you able to see the screen that does have the proposed resolution? Is that viewable by everyone? So it's basically restating the resolution passed in December. It's bridging into what the proposed new committee would charter, as Noah indicated, would consist of.
I think that's wonderful.
Having served on a subcommittee with Commissioner Reynolds in the past, I deeply respect his respect for the appropriate guardrails that have to be observed. And I think he's touched on that. I think he's touched on, in item 3, the kind of being the conduit for ideas. And again, as I think we've alluded to today, a need for that to put some order around what really would be actionable items for us, right? And as opposed to just, and particularly in inefficient ways where we're not even aware of what staff may be doing in some cases. So I think the committee could provide that kind of, as Commissioner Johnson said earlier, provide that kind of filter in a way that makes it ultimately far more efficient from the commission to then take committee either points of action or gauging even attendance by commissioners at various and sundry things, but in a way get some focus, if you will, or ownership of this issue in a way that's more tangible than just having quarterly discussions about it. So my sense is that this Commissioner Reynolds, am I accurate in saying you propose as a motion that this be adopted, right? And again, this is what's on the floor now, as Commissioner Snowden has yielded her initial motion in deference to the specificity of Commissioner Reynolds' proposed resolution.
Yeah, I'm making the motion as you see on the screen, looking for a second, and then we can have discussion.
And I will be glad to second the motion.
Commissioner Reynolds has motioned the adoption of this as a resolution by the full commission. Commissioner Snowden has seconded. Do I hear discussion? Further discussion?
I think we're ready to move.
I think the group wants you to call the question.
I think, again, kudos to you, sir. I mean, that's usually wordsmithing is going to usually takes a lot. It did even on the original resolution, as you remember last December. So
I think the motion of this, the feeling of this committee is we want to move forward and do something.
that's right. Within the bounds of our charge and within what we can do, and not and frankly navigate what we all know to be the environment we work and live in. And but we have all, I think, for whatever perspective we come from, I think we have a very shared passion that this is time to stand up and be counted for history, period.
And if I may add some commentary on the first bullet point, that's a very important first step. And several of us made comments about this at the last meeting, but the purpose of number one is for us to confirm who we are and who we are not, and what we can do and what we cannot do. And I think we need to get that right first before we move on to either 2 or 3. So don't want to underemphasize the first bullet point.
No, that's why I said a moment ago, I value your perspective on that and your tradition on and sensitivities on that. So quite appropriate.
And Mr. Chair, and Mr. Reynolds, Commissioner Reynolds, I would simply add that I think this committee could help to bring about the kind of realignment that we need. I'm thinking about, the automobile with the 4 wheels on it, when they tend to get out of an alignment and wobbling. You want the vehicle to move in the same direction, but sometimes it doesn't seem to move that way, So we are the keepers of the state's history, the advocates, the guardians, and all of that. But sometimes we have begun to move in a kind of willy-nilly fashion, a helter-skelter and all of that. And I think this committee could help to refocus, our mission, and what we do, so that we do not try to run in our lane and then in the lanes of others as well, that play a support role for us. And that's been my concern about us not trying to play the role of the teachers in the classrooms, who have been trained with some pedagogy and methodology for delivering the resources that we have. But I heard you saying, Chairman Ruffin, that you have been using the opportunities that are presented to you to speak to folk in the financial district, bankers, and emphasize the importance of history to them. And then they can get excited and go back into their little sectors and do whatever they need to do. And so I think that's what this committee could help the commissioners do, and also help us to understand what is happening broadly, across the field of commissioners, So I'm very supportive of all of this.
Thank you, sir. Any further discussion before we move to a vote? Hearing none, then we will vote on the motion by Commissioner Reynolds, seconded by Commissioner Snowden. Mr. Clark,
Overwhelming yes.
Ms. Condell,
Aye.
Dr. Denard,
Aye.
Ms. Groom,
Yes.
Dr. Johnson,
Absolutely, yes.
Dr. Lee,
Yes.
Ms. Phillips,
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds, Mr. Reynolds,
Aye.
Ms. Snowden,
Aye.
David Ruffin, aye. Passed unanimously. Thank you very, very, very much. And I think the next question, of course, is who constitutes that committee. And I'm, unless told otherwise, out of either Dr. Waters or Mr. Fagan, I will take the prerogative of the chair to appoint the committee. Obviously, I would like Commissioner Reynolds as chair. I would like the following to be members, and this is not in any way, form, or fashion picking favorites, because what I was quite aware of in this exercise is we could in the attempt would be to make it almost a committee of the whole, but that would get us in, I think, some difficulty with what we even would mean quorums of the whole commission, and you can't go that route. So basically, we're going to limit it to 5, I think would be appropriate. And I would propose the members of the commission reporting to Chair Noah Reynolds would be Barbara Groom, Susan Phillips, Mrs. Condell, Shana Condell, and Dr. Denard. Again, in no way on earth, I think every single one of our commissioners would be capable and contributory to it. But that's basically what I would suggest as a good working committee. Some of it, frankly, was because of some of you I eliminated because of what you're already doing, what you have in terms of on your plate already, and things that you're doing that I hope you understand the rationale for that. And I may need to ask a legal question here. Is that does the appointment of the committee members require a vote?
You know, Sarah, we don't have our general counsel on this call. And I know that you've already had a conversation with him, Mr. Chair. I don't
know.
I
don't want to give you the wrong answer, have it be wrong legally.
And I'm happy to check into that.
I wouldn't think that you would have to, because obviously what the committee comes up with, they're not going to be making a final decision. They'll be presenting that to all of us that would be voted on at that point. So I would think the chairman would have the prerogative to appoint the board.
Commissioner Newell, Clark, I think that is exactly what I have been told in some other circumstances by Phil Fagan. He said, you have a prerogative as chair to appoint certain people as long as you're not making decisions through that process already, binding the commission.
Robert's Rules of Order say that you have that power.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm simply bringing that as well. I did that numerous times as mayor, but those committees did not make final decisions.
Yes, and I value certainly your record as mayor in Lexington. I value your opinion about that very much. Okay, well, I want to take this moment to thank the entire commission. I think we've made a big step to get beyond all of our emotion about this issue to a practical working environment. And, I promised every one of the members of the commission or the committee, I should say, that it shouldn't be heavily administrative, a heavy burden. It's just, hit the high spots, keep us focused. The others of us on the commission, as you know, I'm not on this. I would be the first in line to be held accountable for David Ruffin. What have you done? in the last quarter, those kinds of things. But I think this is just the conduit I think we need to take this to another step. And I just want to thank the entire commission for its broad support and the staff, because you all helped start this process by those wonderful responses to last December's resolutions when you gave us very robust reports. But even within those, we realized that there was a potential for, not realizing what the staff was doing, or willy-nilly throwing added duties on a staff that was already way overtaxed in certain other areas. So I think this is going to give us the filter and the impetus to carry this forward. So again, thank you. Thanks to everyone, particularly, of course, to Noah Reynolds for his effort in this. Okay, so in terms of the next item on the agenda, I'm going to go back to Dr. Waters. And I noticed, Dr. Waters, that for the first time and I just realized this, that right before a meeting, that you don't have a separate section on your report. So I'm presuming you may want to make some comments in addition to maybe just leading us through some of the other division directors' reports. Is that a fair way to?
It is, Mr. Chair, and I won't prolong this, because you have the reports from each one of the divisions in front of you that you've had a chance to read. You've seen all of the activity that is going on. I still will say, Mr. Chair, now being a member of the team here and a part of this wonderful department, that I remain amazed by all of the activity that is going on here and everything that each one of the divisions in the Office of Archives and History are doing on a daily basis. And I want to take the time to thank each one of the division directors that we have on the call right now for the work that they do and that their teams do on a daily basis to really, and I would say, continue to kind of cultivate the culture and the history of our state is such important work. Other than that, there's a lot of activity that is going on. You know that we are without a division director for our state museum division. We are working through that. We hope to be able to give you a report on moving forward the search to fill that position, perhaps by the next meeting. But I'm happy to say that things continue to move forward there in that division. There's a lot that came out of the most recent budget that affects that division. We will have a $180 million renovation and expansion of the flagship museum here in Raleigh. But we also have the work that is continuing to happen in Fayetteville around the North Carolina Center on the Civil War, Emancipation, and Reconstruction. And happy to see the smile on Dr. Bryan's face. That work is really proceeding forward, and you'll be hearing more about what is happening there as they continue to move forward with that work. But we also have expansion plans going on in the maritime museums out at Cape Hatteras at the Graveyard of the Atlantic. There's a lot of work that is happening there on the installation of a new permanent exhibit there. I will be out there with our deputy director next week just to visit to see how that work is proceeding. And also in Beaufort, down in Beaufort, they had already received, the Maritime Heritage Foundation had already received $3 million from the state legislature to begin plans for the expansion of the Maritime Museum in Beaufort at Gallett's Channel. They got an additional $10 million in the most recent budget to go ahead and begin the construction of the Maritime Education Center in Beaufort. And that work is actually proceeding and moving forward. So as you can see, Mr. Chair, there's a lot of work that is going on. I have told people kind of humorously, I know more about construction now than I ever thought that I would know, because we're working very closely with our capital projects team to move that work forward. And, Michelle is on the call. There's a lot going on in the Division of State Historic Sites with the Thomas Day site. We also, to go back to the museums as well, we have inherited from the state legislature to bring in a new museum, the Tobacco and Farm Life Museum in Kenly, North Carolina, And I was just down there to visit that museum with the secretary and other members of the senior team just last week as we worked through the process of bringing them into the museum system. But those are some of the activities that are happening here. I want to thank Ramona as well for hosting the National Conference of State Historic Preservation Officers. Again, we mentioned that earlier. I thought that was important work. We had a really good visit to Winston-Salem, taking the team, the folks who came to visit across the country. I think, Ramona, you're on the call. I don't know who was the most distant person to come and join us. I want to say it may have been Wyoming, our colleague in Wyoming who was here to visit, and we're all very impressed and amazed by the work that is happening here in the state of North Carolina around our State Historic Preservation Office. We had a really good visit to Mount Airy to see the tremendous work that is happening there and how our tax credits program is really driving, I think, the renewal of small towns in North Carolina. And the most perfect example, I think, is Mount Airy. And Ramona, I'll invite you to kind of comment on that if you want to, but those were very important things that have happened since we most recently met.
Thank you, Dr. Waters. Now, I just want to echo again our appreciation to Mr. Reynolds for making everyone feel so welcome and introducing them to his hometown. And we stayed at the Cardinal Kempton, which was the former R.J. Reynolds headquarters building, and then went down the hill to the Innovation Quarter, which is another example of the use of historic tax credits with a lot of work around medical technology and new inventions that are going to advance healthcare throughout the state as well. So I think you all know that preservationists tend to be futurists. So we got certainly a sense of that through our visit to Winston-Salem, and appreciate everyone.
Thank you, Ramona. And Commissioner Groom, I think you'll be happy to know that, I'm making the most of some of the folks from Asheville who have moved down here to our area. I was happy to have taken the former chair of the Board of Trustees at UNC Asheville, Robbie Russell, to visit the Museum of History here for the first time. He is now one of the grants officers for the Keenan Family Trust. And so that I was working him to get him and the trust interested in what we're doing at the museum and across the division. The one thing that he did say to me, Barbara, was that you become very well versed in this work. So maybe I made a really good sell with him when we had him there. But just a lot of activity going on across the department, and especially in the Office of Archives and History. And so we're really grateful for that. And grateful just to have you all support. So, Mr. Chair, I'll end my remarks there.
Well, Dr. Waters, obviously we feel extremely happy to be working with you. I know a few telephone calls I ever get in my day-to-day work do I like better than you. and you are so industrious, and your entire staff is, and it's so obvious. And for other commissioners who may not recall, we adopted an agreement some time ago to have in-person, when we're meeting in person is when we have the in-person directors reports. That's the reason for that. It just tends to prolong the virtual calls like this, but that's not in any way to overlook the in-depth work that our staff is doing. And we can't say it enough how much we recognize that from you individually, but also every single member of your staff is very much acknowledged and appreciated by this commission.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So as we move on, and I know we're about an hour and a half into this meeting, so we're closing in on the end of it. Is there any other business that we are aware of that needs to be discussed?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I wanted to comment Ms. Lanier for including in her report a section on the passing of a legend. That is the death of Dot Sproul Redford, who did so much to develop a Somerset plantation. And my reason for commenting on this and applauding Michelle, we both attended the memorial service, which was well attended by folk from across the state and maybe outside of the state. But as I attended that presentation, I thought that we need to do something more to recognize the pioneering work of Dot Redfoot in a public and permanent way. I understand that a museum, not a museum, but a new visitors center is in the works there. And I'm not proposing that we consider a building for her, but we need to do something to tap into the historic nature of her work and genealogy and history and all of that. She put North Carolina on the map and bringing enslaved folk into the discussion of slavery in a way that we have not seen even in at Monticello or other historic sites. And this passing of this legend needs to be recognized, I'm saying, in a permanent way. And I just wanted to go on record as noting that I don't know exactly, what can be done or what should be done, but let the record show that Commissioner Denard, indicated on this day that something should be done to honor this legend in a permanent and public way. And I think that's another way of how we emphasize the importance of history to future generations, how we recognize, and how we recognize the folk who have been these pioneers. Now, we have Golden Frink's house in the works in Edenton as a site that could possibly be used to bring us together to talk about civil rights in North Carolina. Now, this could be a place to firm up our discussion about North Carolina and slavery, or genealogy in North Carolina, public history in North Carolina, as we think about the life and work of Dorothy Spruill Redfoot. So I have had some conversations with the family, and I will give some more thought to possibilities of what we can do to give some permanent and public recognition to Dorothy Spruill Redfoot. So thank you for considering my comment here.
Well, Dr. Denard, that's an excellent suggestion, and obviously it'll be in the record of the minutes, but I think it's also a bit of a bridge to what I wanted to mention. And you mentioned Golden Frink's house in Edenton. I'm hoping, I did not hear from Commissioner Dixon. I hope he's okay. And but certainly I know he was integral in getting us and getting the Golden Frink's house approved. And I particularly loved your idea about even within existing projects that have gone through, so to speak, the process of getting approved and well down the road, right? I.e. the Golden Frink's house, of using that as a multifaceted venue for people like this great woman is an excellent idea. And that's, again, one of the things that I think we get out of these kind of discussions, but I would hope that, staff would make note of that as well.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, Commissioner Johnson.
I just wanted also in light of, thank you, Dr. Denard, for your remarks, but in a slightly different cat, going back to the coast, the North Carolina Maritime History Council just closed their last week, had their annual conference. But I really want to point out that at this one, it was about legacies, and they lifted up and had sessions in honor of the following people who've been important to us in terms of especially maritime history, and that is Harry Thompson, Wilson Walker Snowden, Dr. Lindley Butler, and Dr. William Still. And doctors, I'm calling Barbara Snowden out a little bit because she attended and was there. And I think it was an important recognition, but also the vibrancy of how history is playing out and who has been a part of some of the foundational things that we're living with today. So it was held at ECU, and I think it was a good turnout for the size of the conference. And I wanted to ask Barbara if you wanted to say anything else, because I really appreciated having her there in attendance to hear these papers in honor of these 4 foundational people in maritime history.
I was very glad to be there, and I very much appreciated them honoring Wilson for his view and preservation. But a couple of the others, some of you may not know Harry Thompson, but he's responsible for the museum in Plymouth. He was also very much involved in the economic development of the Roanoke River and the tourism things that are going on there. Dr. Butler, I hope you all have picked up his book on, he's a very good colonial historian, especially about the Lord Proprietors. But the thing that impressed me was the new people, these young historians who were writing about ships and about slavery, about the legacy of going to Liberia. I had not thought about that. There were a number of good papers, and it's always good to hear and see young people who want to do the research that we all support. Thank you, Valerie.
And I put in the chat a link to Tributaries, which is a publication that comes out that captures some of this, and to encourage you all to, that's another way we can show up for history.
Yes.
And Commissioner Snowden, I have been meaning to ask you, are you familiar with Clark Twitty?
Yes, that's why I sent you the book.
Okay, yes, okay, thank you very much. So this came through you, in effect. Okay, thank you.
I will be honest. Clark is writing on the Outer Banks, and he has written. This is his 2nd book, and the reason it went to you is because I didn't understand the beginning of the book was all about how bankers and how they financed the development of the Outer Banks. So I turned it over to you so you could explain it to me in simple forms.
You tell him I deeply appreciate it, because I thought he touched on some things that typically you don't get into with, history. You're right. A lot of it was, you and I have talked about Ray White and the Whites in Manio and all of that. So, that was you. Please, I don't have his address because it didn't, and I need to thank him personally, but you make sure when you see him how much I have appreciated reading the book.
And one of the things that I may bring to this committee that some of you think in bigger terms than I do, but like they say, all politics are local, all history is local too.
Yeah.
Because it starts out with people being interested at the local level and expanding on to the state and national level.
That's exactly right. And Dr. Denard and I had that conversation just yesterday about, and this harkens back, I hate to bring this back up about what we've just done with our committee, but one of the things we have to realize, and I think Barbara Groom certainly embraces this, the real love of history starts often at the young ages, not when people are in college, right? And it's you basically have to engender that interest at a much younger age than at the higher levels of academia. And I just feel so strongly that also is very much a local issue too, Ms. Snowden. Okay, well, any other comments? Again, I needless to say, feel like we've had a wonderful meeting again today. The only chair announcements I have, it's that traditional time of year, is to announce as permanently as I can the dates for next year, quarterly meeting dates. We will, unless we have strong feelings, we'll still do an alternative in-person virtual rotation. The next meeting I'm proposing would be March 20th on a Wednesday in person. So March 20th, this obviously will be in the minutes, hopefully. And then the June meeting will be Wednesday, June the 19th. That would be virtual. The September meeting, Parker, I moved this suggested on Wednesday until Tuesday, September 17th in person. I already have an obligation for the latter half of that week. I don't want to repeat of what we had to go through last September at the last minute to change the date. So hopefully that Tuesday, the 17th, Parker would work. And particularly for the in-person meetings, obviously the staff has to prepare secure, facilities in the department for that. And then the last meeting for last quarter for 2024 would be Wednesday, December the 11th, which would be virtual. Again, these will be in the minutes, but hopefully you can begin to look at your calendars. And if there are significant conflicts, of course, let's try to talk now, and the further out we can get, we can sync our calendars a little more effectively.
Would this all be 10 o'clock, or do you have times?
Yes, I'm sorry, beg your pardon. All 10 o'clock, because I know that was a confusion that was really unintended, but quite confusing, that we were going, I think, for virtuals, we were doing afternoons, and then in person at 10 routinely or uniformly at 10 o'clock is a far better way to approach this.
I do have a question about June. That lands on, I have a Juneteenth. Yeah.
Juneteenth. Yeah,
the state does?
That's right. I just realized that. You're absolutely right. I'm certainly capable of moving that to the 18th, because I've already checked if that would be a more appropriate time. Is that? You're absolutely right.
Yeah, we observe that here at the museum, but I didn't know if the state did.
Well, actually, more and more financial institutions are, which I think is quite positive. I'm very happy to say, and that's going on particularly in a lot of other states, but Juneteenth is being recognized more and more. So thank you so much for.
What date in June did you say? The 18th?
June 18th, which would be Tuesday, June 18th.
Could you please repeat the date in December? I had a little computer glitch.
Yes, Wednesday, December 11th.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It would have been a possibility on the week before, but that's coming right off of a potential Thanksgiving, and this kind of puts us right in the middle between Thanksgiving and Christmas. Maybe a better shot at attendance. Well, I will again thank you all very, very much. Again, traditionally, I hope everyone stays healthy and has a great remaining holiday season for 2023, and very happy and prosperous 24. And I just again want to thank every one of you, staff and commission, and the supporting public that's listening today for the things that we were able to accomplish today, and I think significant. So again, and Dr. Bryan, can't say enough how wonderful it is to see you again.
Yes.
Yeah.
Delighted to be here and to hear the discussion. Brings me up to date. So I look forward for sure to the very next meeting and see where we've come and be excited about where we will go. I'm delighted with what I hear from all of you. And I wish former members could hear all of it. I think they would be excited too. So thank you.
Thank you. So because we are again in a virtual state, I do have to call for a motion to adjourn. And then we'll have one last roll call.
I move motion to adjourn.
Dr. Denard moves. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Dr. Johnson seconds. Yes, thank you. That was very enthusiastic, Dr. Johnson. You must have somewhere to go, which I'm sure you do. Okay, all in favor, Mr. Clark.
Aye.
Ms. Condell.
Aye.
Dr. Denard.
Aye.
Ms. Groom.
Aye.
Dr. Johnson.
Aye.
Dr. Lee.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Ms. Snowden.
Aye.
David Ruffin, aye. Again, thank you all and happy holidays.
Merry Christmas.
Happy
all.
holidays, everyone.
Thank you.
Happy holidays, folks. Bye-bye.
Happy
Bye.
holidays. Okay.